We've been lied to about work, but there is another way. The idea that a job brings dignity, that a good career leads to financial security, progression, purpose, even identity, this was never really true for most people. At times, work can be satisfying. My decades working as an economist have at times been stimulating and enjoyable. But even in this case, work has often meant subordination, not self-actualization. Still, the myth that our job gives us meaning persists. Today, that myth is breaking down. Employment is no longer seen as the path to a good life, but increasingly as a source of anxiety, exhaustion, and disillusionment. In fact, the evidence now suggests that work is becoming worse, less autonomous, less rewarding, less meaningful. And while this has been the case for many low-wage workers, the rot has spread upwards. Professionals, skilled workers, even white-collar roles, once considered aspirational, are now subject to the same hollowing out. If work was ever a route to personal flourishing, it's rapidly ceasing to be. I think that the problem starts with the education system. We have to recognise a simple truth. The modern education system is designed not to liberate minds, but to prepare bodies for labour. Children are sold the dream of doing well in school in order to get a good job, but scratch the surface of that promise and what emerges is not empowerment, but compliance. Education has become a pipeline, not to enlightenment or fulfilment, but to employment in the service of profit. A good career in this context means becoming a reliable employee, a dependable cog in the machine. The end point isn't creativity or independence, but labouring under the control of someone else, typically someone whose wealth depends on extracting as much value from your time as possible. We rarely question this. We tell young people that their job is to succeed, by which we mean fit in, be punctual, be efficient, and above all, be productive. But productive for whom? The illusion that work is empowering begins to shatter when we look at what employees can actually control. Recent UK data paints a stark picture. According to the UK Skills and Employment Survey, only 34% of workers in 2024 reported having high task discretion, down from 62% in 1992. Let that sink in. In just over 30 years, the number of people who feel they have real influence over how they do their job has almost halved. At first, this trend was concentrated in lower paid roles, where automation and surveillance technologies reduced discretion to a minimum. But since 2017, it's been spreading to professionals, lawyers, academics, healthcare workers, journalists, whose jobs are increasingly defined by prescriptive frameworks, key performance indicators, and administrative burden. The job may be well paid, but it's no longer yours to shape. What's vanishing is the freedom to think, to adapt, to make meaningful decisions. Instead, work is becoming more rigid, more monitored, more draining. We're told that we find meaning in our jobs. But how can meaning really flourish in a context of control and anxiety? Unsurprisingly, the psychological toll of work is growing. According to a recent report by the UK Office for National Statistics, 22.6% of UK adults were experiencing high anxiety levels at the end of 2024. Within the workplace, a CIPD survey found that 25%, 1 in 4 Scottish workers, feel their job negatively affects their mental health. 41% reported being miserable at work. 58% reported excessive pressure, and 66% reported being exhausted at work. These aren't outliers. This isn't a quirk in the data. They're early warning signs of a systemic crisis. Add to this the long-term stagnation in wages. Research from the Resolution Foundation shows that the average UK worker was earning £11,000 less per year in 2023 than they would have been if pre-2008 wage growth had continued. We're working harder, for longer, under greater pressure, and yet still struggling to survive, let alone thrive. This wasn't always inevitable. After World War II, the social contract between labour, capital and the state allowed for a period of shared prosperity. Workers had rights, wages rose with productivity, Social housing, public healthcare, and pensions provided a buffer against the worst forms of economic insecurity. But neoliberalism, unleashed in the 1980s, reversed much of that progress. It broke the back of union power, sold off public assets, deregulated financial markets, and championed the flexible labour force, a euphemism for precarious, underpaid and expendable workers. And in the name of efficiency, it sanctified productivity metrics while devaluing the actual experience of work. Employees become data points, commodities. Managers become enforcers. Everything not directly tied to shareholder value becomes dismissed as indulgence. Today, even the more humane rhetoric of recent decades, employee well-being, work-life balance, purpose, is often just that, rhetoric. At root, the economic system remains committed to extracting maximum labour at minimum cost. I think it's interesting to ask the question, what could work be like? If modern employment alienates us, it's not because we're unwilling to work. It's because the work we're offered is so often devoid of meaning. Humans aren't built for idleness. We're wired to create, to make, to engage our minds and bodies in acts of shaping the world around us. The tragedy isn't that people don't want to work, it's that the structure of work under capitalism so often deadens the very instincts that make us most human. Marx imagined a society in which a person might hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening and criticise after dinner without becoming a hunter, farmer or critic. His vision wasn't about laziness or utopia, but about freedom, the ability to shift one's energies freely, to engage in diverse, meaningful activity, unbound by economic coercion or rigid professional identity. In that spirit, we might ask, what is it about work that makes it worth doing? It's not always about utility. Many of the most absorbing human activities, assembling a jigsaw, building a complex Lego model, colouring in a mindfulness colouring book, these are completely unproductive in economic terms. They're done purely for their own sake. The joy lies in the process, the concentration, the creativity, the small satisfactions of progress and resolution. This isn't trivial. It suggests that good work has more in common with play, craft and ritual than with profit. To work well is not simply to produce, it's to engage, to bring mind, body, perhaps even soul into alignment. I do think that we're starting to see a change in mood, that something is shifting. The pandemic revealed how many jobs were either meaningless or mismanaged. Essential workers were glorified but not compensated. Office workers, liberated briefly from the performative rituals of the workplace, realised how much of their time was wasted. A wave of quiet quitting followed. There's a growing hunger to rethink what work is for. And it's not about laziness, it's clarity. Alienation is no longer just a theoretical concept, it's an observable condition. It's the quiet, shared knowledge that this system is not working for us. We've been taught that work is noble when it's useful, when it produces, earns, contributes to GDP. But what if usefulness isn't the highest calling? What if the relentless demand for productivity is exactly what's breaking us? It's time to ask the question, is there another way to live? What if our work wasn't always measured by output or efficiency? What if we had the space and the cultural permission to work on things that deepen the soul, not just feed the machine, to create, to nurture, to reflect, to explore? Marx imagined that world where labour would no longer be a means of survival, but an expression of freedom, where we could move fluidly between creative, physical and intellectual pursuits. That vision wasn't a call for laziness, but for wholeness, for the freedom to develop every part of ourselves, not just the parts that the market finds profitable. In a world of advanced technology and extraordinary collective wealth, it's no longer naive to imagine an economy where care, beauty, rest and play are not treated as luxuries, but as foundations of a meaningful life. We don't need to abandon work, we need to liberate it, not from effort, but from domination, not from challenge, but from drudgery, not from purpose, but from profit. Because we weren't born to be units of production, we were born to live. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd be very grateful for that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.